Hello and welcome to the UFC talk show In the Cage, brought to you by Sportology TV with myself, Ali Drew, and my co-star Ouney.
Guys, welcome to In the Cage, where we talk everything UFC. We talk about the weekend's fights, we talk about future fights, and we have special guests. And today we've got a big guest on, haven't we, Ali? A huge guest. Somebody who's the face for UFC on BT Sport. Somebody who's been around the combat sports scene for a while, covering boxing for TalkSport, and covers football as well. So that's an extra addition. None other than Adam Catterall. Adam, thank you very much for being on the show.
Listen, it's an absolute pleasure, but the way you big me up there, your audience are going to expect maybe Conor McGregor or Tyson Fury or something like that. I mean, you give me a massive fanfare there, so I better live up to all expectation.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. We're obviously in the middle of the Fight Island stuff. We had UFC 251 at the weekend. We've got another show tomorrow night where there's a couple of British fighters involved, and then there's another two before they head back to the Apex in Las Vegas. So yeah, it's full on. And boxing's obviously kicked off as well now, hasn't it? It kicked off last Friday night, and we've got Eddie's back garden to look forward to as well. All good times. Fight sports are back. Keeps a roof over my head anyway.
So Fight Island, the idea out of a movie.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
Well, the idea is fantastic. I mean, anybody that has studied those Bruce Lee films from the late 1970s, they've seen Enter the Dragon. The idea of a mixed martial arts competition just being landed on this evil doctor's lair where the best of the best from around the world come and knock seven bells out of each other absolutely turns everybody on, doesn't it? And the idea of it caught everybody's imagination. There were lots of chat, of course, of the octagon being on the beach and maybe being able to see some sharks in the sea and all that type of stuff, or maybe people making their octagon entrance via a Chinook helicopter. Listen, this isn't the WWE. There's still protocols and various things that we've got to adhere to in order to get these guys in the octagon to fight on the night. The idea of it and the Disney of it was brilliant, but the reality of it is that we needed to give international fighters an opportunity to fight. With everything that's going on in this crazy world right now, a lot of the guys from Europe and from other parts of the world just couldn't get into America with travel and visa restrictions. So therefore, they had to look for something somewhere else in order to get those guys work, because, as you know, you guys cover these sports. If these people aren't fighting, they ain't earning any money, and they've just got mortgages and rent to pay and children to feed like the majority of us. So Yas Island, Abu Dhabi was the place, man. So a man-made island in the Middle East with a 10-mile radius. Yeah, go on, we'll take over that for a bit and we'll call it Fight Island. The idea is fantastic, and at the weekend, I would say 80% of it lived up to all our expectation.
Before we talk about UFC 251, I was doing some Instagram stalking, Adam. I was looking on your Instagram, and if somebody didn't know you, they'd actually think you and Masvidal are best mates.
That's it, man.
Just talk to me about, Masvidal in the flesh. A lot of people don't get up to meet him the way that you get to talk to him. Just give me a lowdown on Masvidal.
Well, for those that don't know too much about this guy, he shot to fame obviously fighting in people's backyards on YouTube for those old school Kimbo Slice videos. And I thought he caught everybody's imagination back then. Anybody that has been into fight sports knows who Jorge Masvidal is. And he's been the Neely man in the UFC for such a long period of time. And I met him properly last March in London, because he came over to fight Darren Till at UFC London. And we all know what happened there. He was the guy that was brought in kind of as a showcase for Till, really, because if you remember, the whole narrative leading into that was Darren Till's the next big thing in the UFC. This is what we're building him up to. Here we go. Go and fight Jorge Masvidal. Now, Masvidal had been out for a period of time. He'd been on this reality TV show. He'd always been the Neely man in the UFC. But on that reality TV show, he'd had this crazy epiphany that he was going to take his career a little bit more seriously. And if he's going to hit the heights that he wants to hit, in his own words, he's going to have to baptize a few people. And he started doing that last year, didn't he? So I met him first of all in London last year, and I found him captivating, charming. You see all the interviews. He's as real as they come. He just tells you how it is. And I love that. And that's the beauty of interviewing people from the fight world. I'm sure you've all experienced this as well. There's a real, authentic nature about them. You know what I mean? They tell you how it is. There's no BS around it. It's straightforward talking, and I love that. And they've all got crazy stories as well, which I buy into. Let's be honest, right? Fighters, whether it's boxing or mixed martial arts, to sign a contract 3 months out, then to go away and train for a fight in an auditorium with a load of people, lock a cage door and let's just have it. There's a chemical imbalance in somebody's head to want to do that for a living, right? So I find that really fascinating. And obviously Masvidal's one of those dudes. So then we fast forward to the Askren fight where he gets the fastest knockout in the UFC. And I was lucky enough that night to be commentating on the event. So the Talk Sport event, we did the commentary on that. And that piece of commentary went around the world and he saw it. Anyway, then we just started messaging back and forth and having a little bit of a laugh. Then, of course, he fought Nate Diaz in New York for the BMF title. And we did an interview there. And it's just been one of those things. I mean, it's the same. Everybody has those people that you interview that you just have that chemistry, I suppose. That's the beauty of it, isn't it? The best interviews, there's a bit of chemistry there. You get them, they get you. Therefore, they'll give you a little bit more. You have a little bit of a laugh. And my job is always just to open the door to the fan. The people that absolutely idolize that guy is to just open the door and say, here he is, and show him off in his best light. Nobody's tuning in for me, mate. Nobody gives a monkeys about me. They're all here for Masvidal. So let's show Masvidal off. And he's a brilliant dude. Yeah. And hopefully he's shown that over a period of time. But yeah, if you do check out the Instagram, we did go out on the lash in Las Vegas at the start of the year. Yeah, he was at the Conor McGregor fight. We was covering that, Conor McGregor's big comeback. And Masvidal's launched this tequila. Yeah, it's a weird, honestly, mate, if you get your hands on it, stay away from it because it's like fire water, trust me. It's called Mezcal Recuerdo. It is coming to the UK. He told me last week it's coming to the UK. It'll go, people will buy it in their droves, but they'll sleep for a long time afterwards, let me tell you, because it's proper.
Let's talk about the main event. Kamaru Usman, champion against Jorge Masvidal, who came in with 6 days' notice. Just looking back at that fight, we know that Usman has the ability to control the fight. He's a great wrestler, and he did that. He pushed him against the cage, controlled the fight, gave him some sore toes with a bit of stomping on the toes. But there seems to be, when I look at social media, there's a bit of displeasure about that fight because people deem it to be boring. What's your opinion on that fight? Somebody who's from the fight scene, somebody who's in the combat sports scene, what was your opinion on that fight?
Well, people who are referring to it as boring, I get it. Because let's be honest, we all come to whatever sport it is that you're into, you come first and foremost for entertainment. That's what you're coming for. If you're buying a ticket for a football match or a fight, whatever it is, you're going there to be entertained. Yep. That's the first thought process. Then if you are entertained, I've no doubt that you gain some type of love and affection for that sport or that team that you're following or that fighter that you're following. And therefore then your knowledge will start to increase as to what that person is attempting to do. Now, I'm lucky enough to have been doing this for a long period of time. So I can totally appreciate what Kamaru Usman were doing. Let's be honest. If you are an elite level wrestler, right, and you are taking on the most dangerous dude in the UFC right at this moment in time in Masvidal, who's been baptizing people in his own words for the last year in sensational fashion, do you want to go toe-to-toe with him? No, man. Why do I want to do that? Why do I want to go toe-to-toe with this guy? What I want to do, in a football analogy, I want to park the bus a little bit, I want to negate all his strengths. I'm going to put all my strengths on him, and I'm going to get the win. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to remain champion, and therefore I've still got my leverage when it comes to the negotiation table because I'm the UFC champion and everybody wants a piece of that pie. Was it entertaining? No, it wasn't. My take on it is, for 20 minutes of that fight, brilliant from Usman. Absolutely domination. Absolute domination. The last 5 minutes, when you're fighting a guy that is coming on 6 days' notice, who hasn't had a full camp, you can tell he's tired. He's blowing a little bit. He's got the heart of a lion. Now, anybody that's followed Masvidal's career knows that he hasn't been finished in the UFC. What a statement that would have been, man. The last 5 minutes for Usman should have been, right, he ain't going to stop me now, so I'm going to put the kitchen sink on this kid. Now, he might not have got the stoppage. He might not have got it because Masvidal is absolute nails and he's very difficult to get out of there. But at least have a go. At least have a go at doing that. And I think everybody would have forgiven it and gone, do you know something? He dominated for 25 minutes. He tried to finish him. Masvidal would have come out with probably a load of kudos going, look how tough this dude is on 6 days' notice. And Usman would have got a lot of credit as well for going, who's going to beat this guy? Who could beat him? So I can understand fans going, he just stomped on his feet and leant against the fence for 25 minutes. I get that. I totally get it. And hopefully Usman maybe learns from that. And in fights to come, we get to see a little bit more entertainment. Don't forget, we got an absolute cracker when he fought Colby Covington in December, man. That was an absolute belting fight, really entertaining. So I'll forgive him. I'll forgive him for this one.
Adam, just talking about that fight, with Masvidal, and UFC in general, when a fighter does lose to that magnitude, it doesn't necessarily lower their stock. In boxing, we see that if a fighter loses, everyone's on his back. Oh no, he's not good enough. He shouldn't be fighting for a world title. Blah 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 blah. In UFC, it's not the case. Masvidal's stock is still very, very high because there's some early figures that have come out that show that 1.3 million pay-per-views were bought. That's big numbers, Adam. That's huge numbers.
Massive numbers. I mean, I've had a few discussions about this over the last 24, 48 hours where people are saying, oh, well, you can't necessarily put it all down to Masvidal. There's 3 world title fights. It's Fight Island and all this. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, there is a tiny bit of justification to that. But if you compare it to other events that the UFC have put on during this pandemic, and don't forget, the UFC have been back since May the 9th. Yeah. You know, the first one that they brought back was Ferguson against Gaethje. Yeah. Everybody was buzzing for that. They couldn't get enough of that. And the fight itself was amazing. It lived up to all expectation. Now, that did 700,000 pay-per-view buys in the United States on ESPN+, right? This one at the weekend has done 1.3 million. So there's 600,000 more buys in the same circumstances that people are feeling with lockdown and pandemic and various things like that. What's the common denominator? The common denominator is Jorge Masvidal. That's the most amount of pay-per-view buys that the UFC have done since Conor Khabib, for the last 2 years. So, like you've just said there, he became the people's champion last year. Yeah. The attitude that he's shown that week, just saying, yeah, I'll do it. 6 days notice, man. I'll fly across the world in the middle of a pandemic. I'll go through all these crazy quarantines. I'm 20 pounds overweight. I'm still going to cut that weight. I'm still going to make it. And I'll turn up. And I'll have a go. And in the first round, he has a go, doesn't he? But it's quite obvious that he hasn't had that full camp. And therefore, he was in with an elite level operator in Kamaru Usman, and he came up short. I don't think he loses any stock whatsoever, not with the fans. Not with the fans at all. If he'd have been taken out in unbelievable fashion by Usman, maybe. But I'll bet this, right? Usman's next fight, whoever it may be, Gilbert Burns or Leon Edwards, Usman's next fight, he will not be paid as much as Jorge Masvidal is for his next fight. Whether that's against Nate Diaz or whoever it is. He is still a premier star in the UFC, even though he was dominated for 25 minutes in that title fight.
Well, moving on to the Volkanovski and Holloway fight, there's a lot of debate and sort of differing opinions on the result. How do you feel that actually went?
You're going to get me in trouble now, aren't you? Here we go. This is tough, and it comes down to the way that UFC fights are judged with this 10-point must system. So therefore, if you watch the fight as a whole for 25 minutes, the majority of people will come away from that fight and go, Max Holloway's won it. Max Holloway's won that fight, and you walk away, and then you get the decision of a split decision where Alex Volkanovski retains his title. So then people shout robbery and all this crazy stuff. When you actually then break it down into round by round and look at who's won what at what points of the fight, it's a lot closer than a lot of people think. First round, second round, by a mile, Max Holloway's rounds. And that's unusual for a Max Holloway fight. Max Holloway starts late in fights. He normally has 5 minutes of downloading a bit of data. What are you going to do? I'll have a look at you for a bit. Okay, I'll start fighting now. And then he runs away with it at the back end of fights and often gets a finish. He's an absolute dominant featherweight, no question about that. So this fight started differently than a lot of people expected. And because Max wins the first 2 rounds, you automatically then start thinking, well, Max Holloway's just going to carry on being Max Holloway. He's going to run away with the rest of this fight. The last 2 rounds, I personally scored him for Alex Volkanovski. I think he changes the momentum of the fight in the last minute of the 3rd round, and that is where the contentious talking point is. That 3rd round, how do you score it? You look at it and you go, right, well, Max has dominated this octagon for 4 minutes, but in the last minute of the round, Alex Volkanovski puts it on him. Did he do enough in that minute, more significant stuff, to get the judge's decision? I can understand why people go, yeah. I personally didn't. I had it at 3-0. I thought Alex then took the momentum into the 4th, won the 4th, and clearly won the 5th. I scored it 3-2 to Max, but it does leave a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth when these lads have had 2 fights. They've had 10 rounds of action, and Max Holloway hasn't had his hand risen on either of the occasions. You know, and there's a real solid argument that he's won 6 out of those 10 rounds, which is a little bit unfair.
What's next for Max then? He's been around for a long, long time. We know he's not finished at all. But You know, the questions need to be asked. He's been in these 2 fights, lost both of them. What's next for him?
That's the $1 million question, man. Because I look around at featherweight and I go, right, who are the top boys? Who are the number one contenders? And Alex Volkanovski is champion, wants the number one contenders. So you look around, you see Zabit there, great fighter. You see the Korean Zombie there. You see Brian Ortega there. You see Yair Rodriguez. They're probably the top 4. Then you've got a guy that's fighting actually tomorrow night in Calvin Kattar. If he comes through brilliantly against Dan Ige, he might be one of those guys. And Josh Emmett's just had a cracking fight against Shane Burgos. It was unbelievable. I wouldn't put them in that top 4 just yet, but they're on the cusp. They're there. So you're thinking, right, which one's the standout guy? Is there one? Maybe, for me, I'd look at that and go, those 4 that I mentioned have probably got to have some type of round-robin eliminator thing, like what we experienced in boxing with the World Boxing Super Series. So you get 2 semi-finals, an eliminator onto Volkanovski. That's how I'd look at that. I mean, other people might have a different opinion. They might go, well, come on, man, Zabit surely is the guy. He's the next in line, so let's rock and roll with it. I would not be against Volkanovski Holloway 3. I wouldn't be against it. Even though Max is coming off the back of 2 losses, I would not be against it. Personally, though, from Max's point of view, he's clocked the featherweight game. Yeah, he's coming off the back of 2 losses, right? And he's lost his title there. He's clocked the featherweight game. Let's have a look at 155. He had a little bit of a dance with Dustin Poirier. No problem coming up short against him. He is mustard, as we saw recently against Dan Hooker. Go up there, go and fight someone like a Paul Felder. Go and get, and listen, Paul Felder's a top operator, right? Yeah. But you win against someone like a Paul Felder. Then all of a sudden people go in, Max can do a bit at lightweight. He's a big name. I personally would move to lightweight if I were Max. But I can understand maybe his unfinished business tag of saying, well, hang on a minute. I've just had 2 knocks with Volkanovski. I've had a real bad deal here in the second one, most certainly. Let's go again. So it's going to be interesting because there's not a standout number 1 contender in my opinion. I would not be against part 3.
Talking about the fight underneath, a fan's favorite, somebody who's been around for a long time, Jose Aldo for Petr. So watching that fight, it was that last minute before he actually got stopped was brutal. I think a lot of people were saying it maybe should have been stopped a bit earlier. What was your opinion on that?
I was commentating on the fight, so I was caught up in the emotion of what Petr was doing, you know, because the way, again, we were talking about changing the momentums of championship fights. 4th round, outstanding. Yeah. Because if you remember the second round, Aldo was outstanding. Aldo looked amazing. He's landing leg kicks for fun. He's battering the living daylights out of Petr. And you're thinking, Aldo is now going to become a 2-weight world champion. Stepping down in weight looks $1 million. 3rd round, it's probably his round as well. 4th round, Petr changes the whole pace of the fight and puts it on Aldo. And you then all of a sudden just saw Aldo wither away. It was weird. And obviously in the 5th round, he gets knocked down really early in the round. Yeah. And he turtles up. And he's taking a lot of punishment. So in the emotion of commentating on the fight, I'm like, I didn't notice it as much. He's taking punishment, but it seemed like he was talking to the ref. He was offering some type of defense. He wasn't fighting back. Let's be honest. Yeah. Since watching it back, should have been stopped a lot earlier. He was getting absolutely lit up. When you can watch it back with no emotion, when you're in the emotion of a fight, it's very difficult to give you a legit opinion. But now I've watched it back and I've seen that last round and I go, probably could get called off a minute, and that's a long time. That's a long time in fight sports. You probably could get called off a minute previous to what it actually did. But you mentioned it there. You're dealing with a legend. You're dealing with Jose Aldo. It's probably going to be his last shot at this. I mean, I know he's only 32, 33 years of age, but he's been around a long time. And there isn't a tomorrow. So maybe Leon Roberts, the referee, was just thinking, it is Aldo. And Aldo's won at least 2 of these rounds. He might even be up on the cards, man. He might even be up here.
Close, very close.
If I pull this now, there's going to be a massive cry of going, why have you stopped it? All he had to do was survive. If Aldo survives, he might win the fight. Even though that's probably going to be a 10-8, a 10-7, a 10-6, because he was taking an absolute whack. But yeah, it probably should have been stopped a bit earlier.
You know, think it was the fight of the night? So that fight was the...
Wow, yeah. That's a good in that, because there were so many good moments. I personally Yeah, I would personally go with Petr and Jose Aldo as the fight of the night, just because of the way it ebbed and flowed and the success that both guys had in that contest, and the way that Petr, who had a lot of questions going into that fight, he's the up and comer. You know, not a lot of people knew what he could do at the top level. They thought they could, but he showed up and he showed championship form. So yeah, I would go with that. There was some lovely performances a little bit further down. Rose Namajunas and Jessica Andrade put on a great fight. And then in that last round, when Rose is absolutely cruising it, she decides to get involved in a tear-up and gets her nose broken with a couple of massive uppercuts. And then all of a sudden, you've got carnage then for 5 minutes, which was great to watch. Really, really good. And there was a kid on the undercard called Yuri Przajka from the Czech Republic. He's a champion from Rising who's come in. It was his UFC debut. He's had 26 wins, 23 knockouts. So the hype was massive about this kid. Everybody had been talking about him for a couple of years. What's he all about? And he fought Volkanovski here. And everybody knows about Volkan, who knocked out Jimmy Manuwa and various other people, been a world title challenger himself, top of the prelims. And then when you watch the kid come into the octagon and the way that his stance is and the way he's fighting, and he's all wrong. If you're reading a textbook, you're going, what is this? Where have they found this guy? This guy's not a fighter. This is nuts. And he starches him. He starches Volkanovski, who's never been knocked out in his career. And he did it in an unbelievable fashion. You're thinking, wow. So he's probably one of them moments where you go, I've seen something special there. Fight-wise, you're right. Petr Jose Aldo was probably my personal favourite fight. A lot of people might go Volkanovski and on Holloway. But that Rose Namajunas and Jessica Andrade fight was a belter as well.
Adam, you spoke about sort of fighters coming up just then. Just talk to me about a couple of fighters that maybe people are not sort of aware of, but you potentially see them becoming stars. There's certain fighters like Zabit, who's got a big hype about him. There's Sean O'Malley, who seems to be another star who's seems to be doing big things. You just provide the knowledge. You've got that knowledge. You see these fights firsthand. If fight fans want to sort of look at a fighter that they want to look for in the future, which fighter would that be?
Well, you just mentioned two absolute belters there, man. I mean, Zabit in that division with Volkanovski. A lot of people, when they saw Zabit come onto the scene, he is like the next generation of mixed martial artists. Traditionally, what you would get is guys coming from karate backgrounds, from wrestling backgrounds, from kickboxing backgrounds, from Muay Thai, all these types of different backgrounds. And then they would do their very best to learn the other disciplines in order to survive in mixed martial arts. Zabit and this new generation of guys that are coming through, they're just mixed martial artists. They do everything. They do everything and they do it really, really well. I mean, look at the dude. He looks like a geography teacher, for crying out loud. You know what I mean? You're probably looking at him at the street, and if he offered you out, you go, I fancy my chances against him. Nah, mate, stay away. He is legit. And he will be champ. At some point, he will be champ. He's a big lad as well, so I can't see him staying at that weight category all his career. I think he is going to maybe have a look at lightweight as well at some point. He's mustard. Sean O'Malley's an interesting one that you've just said there, because he burst onto the scene with a lot of hype about him off the back of the Contender Series, Dana White's Contender Series. And then he got himself in a bit of bother with marijuana, and he ended up getting a suspension, and he's been out of the octagon for such a long period of time. But the hype never went away. He's got a massive fan base. People were buzzing off this kid. People watching this, if you've never seen him, just Google Sugar Sean O'Malley. Tattooed dude, crazy, big afro, that he multicolours, talks the talk. He just appeals to the new generation of mixed martial art fan. He really does. And he's got this massive following. So that's one thing, tick. Then when he turns up, when he turns up in the octagon, my word, can he fight. But he does it in a way where he ain't rock'em sock'em robots. He's not like just going to war with people. There's no need for that. He is unbelievable. Knockout artist, really thinks about his work, sets shots up. He's next level. And then that bantamweight division is red hot. You've just got a new champion in Petr. Yeah. You've got the likes of Aljamain Sterling, who's probably going to be his next challenger. Yeah. Cody Garbrandt's coming off the back of an unbelievable knockout as well from one of the lockdown shows. And on that same show, Sean O'Malley got an unbelievable knockout as well. He again will go all the way, and he'll go as far as he wants to go. He's like this generation's Conor McGregor, Sean O'Malley. That's the best way of being able to probably call him, because he's just got it. He's just got star power, and he knocks dudes out. That is legit. There's a kid that I tipped at the start of the year. I think he's fighting in a couple of weeks, I think, called Sadiq Yusuf, Nigerian fighter.
Nigerian fighter, yeah.
mate. I'm telling you now. If you like flashy stuff, if you like people doing spinning stuff and like taking you back to the Bruce Lee movies, he's the kid. I think he's had 5 fights in the UFC. He's only a young lad. He's just got American residence as well. I think he's trying to get his mum American residence over there. I met him in December last year on the original Holloway Volkanovski card. He was in Las Vegas fighting that night. He was great that night. Sweet kid, bags of personality, just a nice lad. But when the door shuts, he puts on the show. So keep an eye out for him, Sadiq Youssef.
And what fights that are coming up on Fight Island are you actually most looking forward to from the bills that you've seen?
Come on. It's all about Darren Till, mate. It's all about Darren Till and Robert Whittaker, isn't it? Yeah. We're blessed. Like I said at the start of your show, the whole idea of Fight Island was to give international fighters the opportunity to work and fight. And a lot of British fighters who were scheduled to fight at UFC London, they've been missing out now for a good 3-month period. They've done full camps. UFC London was the first UFC card to get shut down. They did UFC Brasilia behind closed doors. The very next week was supposed to be UFC London, and then all the pandemic kicked off and everything went into lockdown. So a lot of fighters did full camps. They were chomping at the bit, ready to rock and roll, and then everything got shut down. So they've had to go through another camp again in order to get themselves ready for Fight Island. Darren Till, Robert Whittaker is the fight. There's no question about that. From a British fight fan's point of view, it's the last one on July the 25th. It headlines that card. Robert Whittaker, the former champion, coming off the back of a loss to Israel Adesanya, who's unbelievable, taking on Darren Till. Now, a lot of people might disagree with this, but because, again, personality, his own social media during this crazy little time that we're living in, he's been unbelievable. Yeah. And the way that he has managed to get himself into this situation to fight Robert Whittaker kind of sets up this as a bit of an eliminator. In the middleweight division, you've got Adesanya, who's the champ, and he's probably going to fight a Paulo Costa, right? That's the fight that a lot of people are thinking that they're going to see. But I'll tell you something, in 2 weeks' time, or 10 days, wherever we are right now, when on the 25th of July, when Whittaker and Till turn up, you know full well this is not going to be boring. It's not going to the mat. These guys, they're not bothered about wrestling. They're not bothered about hugging each other's legs or, as some people refer to it, as crotch sniffing. Nobody wants any of that nonsense, right? These guys are going to try and knock each other out. And that appeals to everybody. No matter what you're into when it comes to mixed martial arts, it appeals to everybody. Somebody will get knocked out in this fight. Somebody will get stopped. And whoever it is, they will rise as the number one contender in that middleweight division. And imagine that. And if that's a British lad in Darren Till, to get himself back into that situation, because he's had one shot at a title against Tyron Woodley at welterweight. Now at middleweight, him versus Israel Adesanya would be unbelievable. It would just be massive for mixed martial arts in this country. Bisping took it to this level, and we're all riding on them coattails right now. We're still riding them. If Darren Till can become a world champion, boom, it goes mainstream. It goes into the mainstream for us here in the UK. And rather than, us being on at crazy times in the middle of the night, I think we'll get a lot more European shows where we can celebrate some of the unbelievable talent that we've got coming through.
Before we let you go, Adam, we can't sort of talk...
Is it over? Jeez, man, I'm just getting in my flow. Is that it?
Before we do let you go, I want to talk about this man over here, Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
He announced another retirement. We know that sometimes when Conor announces a retirement, it's not necessarily him calling it a day. It's just him calling it a day for a couple of months. This time around, though, what do you make of that? Do you reckon he'll be back?
It's random that you're asking me that. It's his birthday today. As we're recording this podcast, I don't know when people are watching and listening to this. It's his birthday today. He's 32 years of age, celebrating his birthday. I've no doubt he's on a jet ski somewhere and enjoying himself, getting full retirement life at 32 years of age. Listen, he ain't retired. I'm telling you now, we've been here before. He's a guy that has had fight sports in his life all his life.
Yeah.
It's in his blood. He loves the adulation of the fans. He lives for that. We ain't going to see him fight behind closed doors. There's no point. Yeah. We're not going to see him rocking up on Fight Island. A lot of people got excited about that prospect. Nah, man, that's not going to happen. Conor McGregor's the big show. Here's a prediction for you with McGregor, right?
Okay.
They built a new stadium in Las Vegas, the Allegiant Stadium, right? Which is obviously set up for the NFL and the new Las Vegas Raiders.
Yep.
The UFC will put a show on there. 60,000 people. It will happen at some point. Might not happen this year with everything that's going on, but they will put a show on there. I'm telling you now, top of the bill, The last song that you hear as an entrance, ring walk entrance, will be the Foggy Dew, and that guy will come out with a tricolor on his back. I'm telling you now, right? That's the next time you will see him fighting in the UFC. He's all about those records. First guy to do this, first guy to do that, first guy, all that. First guy to fight at the Allegiant Stadium. And don't be surprised if the dude across the octagon is Jorge Masvidal.
I was just about to ask you that. But yeah, that'd be a phenomenal fight. Actually, the numbers that would do would be absolutely outswell.
Off the chart, man. Off the chart.
They do more numbers than Khabib, Conor. Do you reckon just because of the personalities that they both got?
I think in the current climate that we find ourselves in, and Conor's done a lot of wonderful work of restoring where he's at in the public mind. He was in a, he'd done a lot of messing about, and he got himself in a lot of trouble, and he'd lost a lot of fans. Let's be straight, he'd lost a lot of fans. But over the last year, all the work that he's been doing in Ireland with the health service out there and stuff, with the way that he conducted himself in the fight week for Donald Cowboy Cerrone, I think a lot of fans are back on board. They're back on board. He's not being an idiot. He's back. He seems to have matured. He's got mixed martial arts back in his life. Masvidal, as you've just been mentioning, is the guy right now. He's the guy. You bring those two powers together, they can talk the talk. They'll sell the back end out of it. You got one guy doing tequila. You got one guy doing whiskey. Let's do it, man. Let's open the door and let's go. It would be. You're right. I think as a mixed martial arts contest, it would be the UFC's all-time pay-per-view. It would beat Khabib. But having said that, though, I mean, prayers and thoughts for Khabib and his family right now, going through what they're going through, obviously with the death of his father. And I hope that we get to see him in the octagon at some point in the not too distant future. And if we do, trust me, them numbers will be through the roof as well, because that dude's a superstar as well.
Just quickly off talking about Khabib then, the fight that seems that's most likely in the future could be that Justin Gaethje fight. It was always going to be Tony Ferguson, and then Justin Gaethje sort of, spoiled that story. The way he did it a couple of months ago was phenomenal. But now it does seem that if Khabib was to come back, it could potentially we could see that fight at some point in the future.
Yeah, that's the fight, man. We lived for him against Tony, didn't we? I think it got made 6 times, and then it just never happened. For whatever reason, it never happened. And then there's always a danger of this in fight sports when certain things don't happen for whatever reason. I mean, the UFC tried; they tried their very best to get it on. It just didn't happen. There's always going to be a bump in the road, and that bump in the road was Justin Gaethje. What a turnaround he's had when he burst on the scene in the UFC. He had a couple of disappointing runs, and then he went on this fantastic run, resulting in that performance that he put in against Tony Ferguson. He was outstanding. That is the fight to make for the Undisputed Lightweight Championship, Khabib against Justin Gaethje. And again, just want to say, no rush for Khabib to come back. Let him deal with what he's dealing with. Let him obviously be at peace, and fingers crossed, still have the motivation to fight. Nobody would blame him if he decided to walk away. I hope he doesn't, because he's a sensational fighter, and him against Justin Gaethje would just be outstanding.
Thank you so much for speaking to us and coming on the show, Adam. It was great.
Well, thank you very much for having you on. Good luck with the show. I know it's a new thing, and fingers crossed if people are watching this now, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you like these people. Make sure you come back on a week-by-week basis and listen to them chatting absolute nonsense about whatever sports they're chatting about. It is a much watch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Great to talk to Adam Catterall there. Make sure you stay tuned, because we've got some great shows coming up. Make sure you like, comment, and hit the subscribe button. We'll see you next time.